Hi, everyone.
Hello. Oh, great. Looks like we already have 8 people on. Perfect. Hello, Andy, Eric, Myung. Hope I got that right. All right. Ocean. Can you give me a thumbs up if I got that right? Ocean. So while we're waiting, I'm adding a poll because I'm very curious about what you guys think. Did it send? Polls. Can you guys see that poll? Are you able to see that one, Julie?
I cannot.
Oh,
Not yet.
bummer. Oh, publish poll. Okay, great. Okay, that's my curiosity. Because personally, I don't think Thanksgiving food is that good because we only eat it like once a year. But don't listen to me. I'm curious about your guys' votes.
I'm actually Canadian, so we've already had our Thanksgiving.
I
But
was gonna ask that, but I didn't want to sound dumb. I was like, so do Canadians celebrate Thanksgiving?
ours is in October because maybe I have no idea the reasoning, but I've
That's
always just
better.
assumed it was because it was cooler in Canada, and so we got started earlier.
That's better because then it's far enough away from Christmas where it's like totally its own holiday. You don't have to listen to Christmas music, no Mariah Carey on the radio.
Yeah, no, it's its own separate world.
All right, looks like we got a big group ready to go. So let's get started.
Perfect. Yes. Okay. So I'm just gonna do the sharing of the screen.
Okay, no one thinks Thanksgiving food's overrated. Okay, that's the end of that. I lost that battle.
So is it showing the presenter screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So I'll do a quick little introduction of who I am and why I'm here. So my name is Julie Beynon. I am doing analytics at Clearbit. And I am responsible for starting from data tracking, so working with our engineering team to make sure we're getting all of the events we want, and getting that into our data warehouse, which is Redshift, and then working with Dbt to transform that, and then either whether it's the visualization or using Census to get that data and operationalize it. So managing that whole data pipeline and responsible, I think it's my goal is just to help teams speed up teams kind of access to answers and access to information that they need to do their job. And so that's everything that I'm kind of building around, is to make sure that information, data, and answers become a lot more accessible to our team. So a little bit about Clearbit Stack, just to see where you can identify, and I'll just jump here. We are Segment. So Segment does all of our tracking. As I said, we're Redshift is our warehouse. I've done a few calls with Census, and I think anyone who's ever been on one of those calls knows that I would prefer to be on Snowflake, but Redshift is working for us. On top of that, we do all our transformations, as I said, with Dbt. Some of our loading we do with Stitch, but most of it is done with Segment. Our visualization tool is Mode. And then we use Census, and right now we have 2 primary use cases for Census. It's getting data into our Salesforce and into our customer IO. And how we got started, and kind of our first use case for getting Census into our world was basically, it's pretty straightforward, really simple use case, was our customer IO data was duplicating. So our segment was connecting directly into our customer IO, and we were just duplicate profiles, so many profiles that one person would get 7 emails. So really, there's a lot of pain around that, and then we've built it out to do the 2 use cases, which I'm excited to talk about today, which is modeling engagement scoring and attribution, and getting that into our CRM and our marketing automation tool. And I've swap the slides here, but the objectives really were to create a scoring model and attribution model that fit how we sell. So there's a lot of tools that do this out of the box, and that's definitely something that we explored initially. But given just the way that Clearbit is set up, we have a lot of free tools, we have free widgets, we have plugins that go into, you know, whether it's your Google Chrome or your Salesforce. And so our tracking isn't centralized, which means that a lot of these out of the box attribution tools and scoring tools didn't really solve the problem, and they could score for 90% or they could add attribution for 90%, which means that we would only be getting a portion of the story and not really being able to tell the whole picture. And so that's when we really started looking into, can we build this in our own customized way and bring in Dbt and Census, and we were able to model all of this data in a way that we could get it access to our go-to-market teams. And so that's the other piece here, is that I don't know about you, but I've worked with some marketing automation tools that do the lead scoring. I've worked with attribution tools, and there's a bit of a black box of how it's calculated. The thing that I like is that we get to decide exactly how things are scored, exactly how things are categorized, exactly how we want to consider our attribution windows. And so we really get to customize that. Obviously, that comes with some cons, but for us, that flexibility of being able to create scoring models and attribution models exactly how we want have been pretty powerful for us. So I'm going to jump into, let me switch over to our visual code, and I'm actually going to walk you through the code itself and show you how that works. Let me just see, I'm not sure why it's not adding for me. Okay, well, let me try one more time. Here we go. Perfect. So basically what we have in here, if you're not familiar with Dbt, this is our Dbt model. And inside of it, this is where that I've been able to build out our custom models. And so you can see right the top one here, we actually have its own folder for attribution touch points, and the second one here is engagement score. So I'll first touch into engagement score and kind of that PQL, MQL engagement scoring model and how we've thought about it at Clearbit. So inside of here, we have a whole bunch of events. And so the reason I like this is we're able to whitelist events. I'm not sure how many of you have this problem at your company where you have a ton of events that aren't really as important, but they do come into the same place. And so for us, we have a lot of events that we track. We use enrichment that, we're Clearbit enriching our data. That's not something that we necessarily want to track for engagement score, but it is something that we want to track for other activities. So here I've pulled out all of the events that we consider engaged. And so inside of each one of these events, we have kind of the staging model. And in here, I'll go into our batch charts because this is actually a really interesting one. So in here we have the event itself, and then we define the event and we define how many points that it gets and whether it's part of the MQL, PQL model or engagement model. And so this may seem a little complicated, and one thing that I will admittedly say at Clearbit is we build things well beyond our sophistication in selling. So this model is built for us in like a year from now. What we really only use is we only use this engagement model, which combines both PQL and MQL. But what we built for is the ability to have an MQL model, a PQL model, and also to be able to define what type of event it is. And so the thinking behind this is that what we want to give sales is the best chance of talking to the lead in the way that they've engaged with us. And so we have leads that perform a ton of activities, and they'll go to a webinar, they'll download a free trial or the free sign up, and so they'll do a whole bunch of things. And so it's hard to know, do you go more product-based, content-based? So the reason that we've done this is that we've defined each event, and then we let the sales team know this is more of a product lead, i.e. they've done more product events than they have done content events. And an example of a content event is that an email's clicked. So I'm just going to stop there. Parker, are there any questions?
We haven't received any questions in the chat, but I have a question. So this email clicked event. So here, are you just assigning it like 1 point of the 10 points that you described in the last?
That's a really good
page?
question. So we arbitrarily set a threshold to 100.
Okay.
And that means that, so once this is kind of 2 out of 100, that's what we consider its value to us. And an email opened is like 1 out of 100. Whereas an ebook form submitted, that's 13 out of 100.
Okay, so if they did an email click and an email open, their score would be 3 out of 100, pretty much, and then it just adds up as they do more events. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, and what we've done actually is, so we have our marketing score model where we do a 30-day trailing. Sorry, my throat is so dry. A 30-day trailing. So essentially we say, how much have they done in the last 30 days? And that becomes their score. And one of the things that we're looking at is like, how much of our ICP, I'm going to need to take a second, it's so dry here in Calgary. How much of our ICP has been engaged in the last month? So we basically take anybody that's done 1 or more things, so has a score greater of 1 in the last 30 days, out of our entire database and see like what percentage of our target market has been engaged with us. And then let me stop sharing here and go back to our Census model. So then we take this and go to Census, and we're able to take that scoring model and send that right into Census. So we essentially send to our sales team, this person this person has been active in the last 30 days. Now, are there any questions on that while I take water so that I can hopefully start talking again?
She's traveling to a new province right now. So Calgary is
I'm traveling to the driest place in Canada, and I am struggling. I'm trying desperately not to crack my throat, but yeah.
So you were just in the IDE that you were in where you wrote the DBT.
Yep.
So you could have written that DBT in there or in Census, from my understanding, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So I could build that model. So where I was here, this is just my personal preference, is I like to build the models here. And the reason I like to use DBT for this is that it becomes my source of truth, right? So I build this model here. We can use it in Mode because Mode accesses our DBT. We can use it in Census. We can use it in anywhere that we want to use it. So we're essentially able to like build it once, define it once, and then that engagement score is consistent no matter where you're accessing it because it's all pushing from DBT. And so Census is that layer that lets us like throw it into Salesforce so that the sales reps are looking at the same report or same number as Mode. But I think as many analysts have experienced, you're not going to get the sales reps really to log into Mode. So what we've tried to do with a ton of this is get that information where the sales team is. And that's kind of brings me nicely into the next model that we built, which is our attribution touchpoints. The naming of this took really long. It took longer than probably building the model. And I'm not sure that I like love it, but anyways, attribution touchpoints is essentially tracking, again, all of these events. And what we do with these events is so for example, we have our contact requests, and we take a look at all of the prospects that we have in our world. And then for each one of these events, the medium, the source, the campaign name, the content, and then we have some kind of offer subjects, offer medium. So a ton of context about what people are doing and then where they came from. And then we create this model that says, John at Acme has, the first time we saw him, he came from a contact request that was from a paid social campaign, that we did on Facebook, right? And then the second time is he came through our Connect widget, And that was, via a referral. And so we're able to track this. And then what we do with all of this attribution is we put it into our Salesforce so that we can mark milestones like what was the converting touch to lead? What was the converting touch to MQL? What was the converting touch to SQL? So that our RevOps team, our demand team doesn't have to touch one line of SQL, doesn't have to open up mode. They can go in and say, this quarter, our top source for SQLs was this offer subject with this channel, right? And so with like dragging and dropping a Salesforce report, they're able to identify where we're getting the most money. And, they can take that all the way down to the pipeline. They can take that as, at any stage of our sales funnel, they're able to identify what is, the converting touch that brought them there. So we've identified 3 that we care about: the converting touch to lead, converting touch to MQL, converting touch to SQL. But you, in theory, could do whatever is important in your company. Whether it's first touch or last touch or whatever, you can make it so that your team has instant access to know this is the most successful channel, most successful offer medium, and also what is not working, right?
And we have a couple of questions here in the chat. John K is curious why you created a separate DBT model for each event.
Yeah, so a lot of these are from different sources. So, for us, our connect comes from a completely different source than our contact request. They don't live in the same schema. So we had to separate them, and then we joined them all in our union events. And just
okay.
and just the way, so they all come into this union event, and then it becomes one big table. And the way that some of the tracking, the capabilities of tracking on this are different depending on the implementation, which is sort of where I was getting at the first point. Is the visibles of the world, they're great, but for the way that our kind of universe is set up, didn't solve the problem and didn't allow us to customize it and define exactly what we found the most important.
Okay, and then the other one, so I think he's saying, do you write the SQL on Census? Could you please rephrase that question? Last name, Anugu. I don't quite understand that one. And then we'll come right back to it.
And while we're waiting for that, what I can do is I can show you. So to be fair, this model was built a long time ago. It was built in about 2019. So I know that Census has improved some of its features. So you can even do what we're doing with less steps. But to show you kind of the model that we do for attribution touch points. So all of that we built over, on our Dbt model, we're referencing that table here. And then we're adding a little bit of Salesforce required cleanup, so to speak. So some of our field names, their length is not as long as the name is. We can fix that again, but this is the capability, depending on the limitations of the tool with which you're putting the data in, you're able to come into Census and slightly tidy up the data, make sure that it's compatible with the tool that you're pushing it into. So the source data itself is still the same. So it's still got that single source from your Dbt model. You're still using that same data. You're just making it compatible with whatever tool it is that you're looking for. So like this is a case where we're writing the SQL in both Dbt and Census, and that's allowing us just to tidy it up depending on kind of what Salesforce needs.
Okay, so when you're doing the substrings and casting things, that's just to cooperate with Salesforce where you're sending the data?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were getting errors with the way it was implemented or the way it was going in because certain subjects started to become longer. And we could update the length of the field in Salesforce. Those are things we can do, but this is the capability depending if you can't do that, you can adjust slightly the field type because you might need one field type for a certain tool and another field type for another tool just to make it work in the ways that you're wanting. For us, the reason that we have it done the way is our converting touch to lead is a 1 or a 0, a binary, so that in mode we can do aggregations a lot easier. But the way we wanted to see the converting touch to lead in Salesforce was a yes or a no, because it's a lot more human readable. And so that's a case where the field is the same, but we wanted to just convert it slightly so that it looked, I think it's actually a checkbox, to be honest. It's a checkbox in Salesforce. So we just needed to adjust it slightly so that it works that way. Yeah.
Okay, we answered that previous question. Now John has another question. How do you associate or connect a touch point to a Salesforce contact? Do you always have an email?
So where we're moving towards is a universal UUID. So we're adding that to our Salesforce, and so that will be the connector. So that universal ID that we use across, that's anonymized and hashed for every single one, but it is based off of the email address. Yes.
Okay, so you create a UID based off the email address, and then that kind of goes wherever you need to send the data.
At the core of it, it's the email address that connects it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And I got a new question from Andy, and I think that I can show a little bit about the sync itself, because that's not always obvious. So back to this model, if we go into the sync, we have an attribution touch point. And so this is referencing that source that I showed you. And inside the configuration, it's sort of any, I think if you've done any marketing ops work, if you're used to a similar UI of like matching, making sure that you're getting the right field to the right destination field. And then you can come in here, you can set whether you want it hourly. So we do hourly on the hour. It's a mirror sync. So that means that it matches exactly what we have in our database. So it just kind of updates, inserts, deletes any records that aren't there anymore. And then we have a sync history where I can check to see what's going on, activity. So here's where I actually turn the button on that says, hey, I reference this query. Here's the data for the query. And then in the sync, I say, okay, take these fields and push them to these fields in Salesforce. And then it updates for us hourly, but you can do it as soon as there's no data. So there's options of doing like continuous every 15 minutes, daily, weekly, manual. So we just prefer this one to be hourly on the hour.
And Andy, if you're asking like how it goes into Salesforce, you just establish like which entity you want to send it in Salesforce. I'm not super familiar with Salesforce, but I'm assuming like you can send to like a company entity and a contact entity. Maybe, I don't know. I'm thinking like in terms of HubSpot.
Yeah, so we created a attribution touchpoint custom object. And so as soon as that was created, it appeared in our option list in Census, and then we just picked that, and then it showed us all the fields that we had created. So you have to create everything in Salesforce before, or at least that's how it was when I did it, 2 years ago, or a year ago. And then as soon as those fields exist, we can just map.
Okay, perfect. And then we had another question on the questions tab. Julie, have you used, let's see. So they want to know if you've created you've used this to create advanced or custom attribution models. I don't totally understand that. That might have been a question from like 10 minutes ago. So we lost the context.
So is it how do you attribute points to touch points?
No, it's have you used this to create advanced or custom attribution models? You know what, actually, Lindsay, I'll go back to like that point in the video and see what your question was, and I'll answer that afterwards.
I do see another question about how do we attribute points to touch points, and I wish I had a really smart answer for you, and I wish I could say like we did this ML model, we did so much data science behind it. We didn't. So this is our first stage of this, and where we sat with the sales team, we sat with the marketing team, and we said, what's important, what converts, and we did our first round of investigation on this, and then we plan to use this to build out the next models. Being that Clearbit is not, a Reddit or an eBay, we don't have millions and millions and millions of data points. So we are working with instinct and historical knowledge of what has converted, and then putting it that way. So it's like, we see 25% of our revenue comes from this offer medium. Okay, that's, that gets more points than the one that it's only had 2% of revenue coming from this offer medium. And that's really how we did it, just looking at historical performance of the events.
And I found that really interesting. So Julie told me that she set up a lot of this DBT modeling like 2 years ago, and she's just going to use all that historical data as the company continues to scale. So it's like right now it's almost learning pretty much, and then it's going to be super useful in a couple months.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe a year, but we have the engagement model. So months. As you saw, we have the engagement model. And so that's the one that we're using right now. And so that's kind of the catch-all. Basically, every event gets that. And we're just scoring whether people are engaged, what percentage are engaged, and which are highly engaged. And so we're bucketing it low, medium, high. And is each new cohort more engaged than the last? That's how we're using it right now. Nothing super scientific, but it's allowing us to gauge, are we doing a better job of engaging our audience?
And if you guys have historical data, or if you found something about scoring that's worked for you, both of us would love to know. We would definitely learn something from that.
And the one thing I will add is that with DBT and Census, so DBT is just that transformation layer. So if for some reason we decided that blog posts are worth more to us, I can go in that model, adjust that score, and it will adjust all historical data if I'd like it to. So it will take all of the data, because I'm not touching the raw data when I do these transformation models. I'm just adding a layer on top. So if blogs become more valuable and I want to add more points and I want to see how that impacts it historically, I can change that, and all of the historical data will update accordingly.
And then we have another question. Any reason why Census over other similar tools or reverse ETL tools? One reason why Census would be used over other ones is that it's a lot faster if you're doing large quantities of data. Actually, I'll send you over a blog that we did yesterday that compared our tool to some of our competitors. And when it came to upload speeds, we were much faster.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I think this is a relatively new market, and there's a lot of unknowns. And so working with Census, they've been kind of a partner for us, and they've helped us think through problems versus just providing the tech. And so for me, when I was looking to explore things that I didn't have a ton of articles on, I was able to bounce ideas off the Census team.
I wrote myself in the reminder.
Boy, I think perfect. We answered are custom entities, custom fields mappable? And the answer is yeah, they are in Salesforce.
All right, I think Andy's got another question.
Cool. Well, I'm glad that this was useful. I'm glad that there was enough in there for everyone.
Oh, we got one more.
That's a really great question. I would say we are not there yet. So one of the things with scoring is that we are at a point where we have enough sales that we don't need to do a ton of prioritization on sales yet. So we haven't had to really lean heavily on the scoring models to prioritize who sales works with. I think in 6 months, I will have a much better answer for you, and we'll have done some evaluation of the score. But right now, there's kind of a maturity curve. And if your sales team doesn't need to prioritize leads, then the scoring model is less important to them. And that's where we're at, and it's built and ready to go, but we're not quite there on the sales maturity just yet. Yeah.
Maybe that's our next webinar. What we learned from the initial lead scoring model.
Yeah. 6 months from now.
Yep. Okay, I think that's everything. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thanks for the amazing questions.
Yeah, appreciate you all showing up.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye now.